150 million Indians are married to their cousins. That's more than the population of France and the UK combined. And it's not just India. Arab Muslim countries have extremely high levels of cousin marriage. The majority of marriages in many places are between cousins. 61% of people in Pakistan are married to their cousin. As someone who's lived in the US for all of his life, it was really strange for me to learn about cousin marriage. Even Alabama, which has a very famous song regarding cousin relations, has a cousin marriage rate of just 0.2%. Across the world, roughly 10% of the world are married to cousins, defined as first and second cousins, totaling around 800 million people worldwide. So what's going on here? Are these societies abusing future children with genetic malformations? Or is this a clever way to maintain social functions while not impacting children's genetic futures? I'm your host Dylan, and even though I raise an eyebrow when I think of cousin marriage, I'm here to look at the question objectively without judging or trying to sell you a story. And purely just look at the facts, the data, and the statistics while trying to keep my biases out as much as possible. First, we'll look at the popularity of cousin marriage worldwide, then any health concerns related to cousin reproduction, then what are the social effects of cousin marriage, and lastly, why Arabs, Indians, and Muslims. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to talk about. First, surprisingly to me, the vast majority of the world allows for cousin marriage. But not only that, first cousin marriage. And even crazier, most countries do invalidate sibling marriage, but a large proportion of the world allows two consenting adults to have romantic relations. But that's off topic. Basically, the entire world allows for first cousin marriage except for a few countries like China, a few European countries, and others sprinkled around. And specifically, while looking at the United States, things get a little messy. Unlike the pretty similar nation of Canada, the US gives rights to both the federal and state governments to make criminal code laws, meaning each state has different laws surrounding cousin marriage. 18 states allow for legal first cousin marriage, 2 allow for it with some strings attached, 6 ban it with exceptions, and 20 ban the marriage entirely. And unlike any other jurisdiction around the world, 8 states apply criminal offenses to getting married as first cousins. Now, if you know simple math, you might be able to tell that those numbers don't add up to 50, and that's due to some states allowing for cousin marriage in specific cases, but also apply criminal offenses to any that don't meet those specific cases. That can get you in prison for over 10 years. I mean, it's definitely an ick, but 10 years also seems like a lot. But even in the states and countries that allow for first cousin marriage, the practice is extremely rare and very shamed by the society. 0.2% in the US, like I said earlier, and somewhere between 0.5 to 1.5% in Europe and Asia, with a hard time of getting really any reliable data for sub-Saharan Africa. But that distinction is important because from Morocco, across North Africa, through the Middle East and over to Pakistan and India, you have societies where large portions of the population are married to their blood family. Which someone with a keen eye might be able to point out is that aside from the Hindu populations in India and Sri Lanka, these boundaries nearly perfectly align with Muslim Arab countries. Pakistan is by far the leader, with 6 out of 10 married people in the country being between relatives of first and fourth degree. Around 800 million people worldwide are married to first or second cousins, meaning they share a great-grandparent. Across the Middle East and North Africa, 20 to 50% of all marriages involve cousins. The overall numbers are difficult to be exact about, but somewhere around 800 million people are in first or second cousin marriages. But it's important to note that there's not a uniformity here, with some Muslim countries having substantially lower rates. Bangladesh is 90% Muslim, but the cousin marriage rate sits around 17%, nearly 1/4 of the rate seen in Pakistan. Turkey is about 25%, and the rate has been falling dramatically over the last 4 decades. The rate of Muslims in India is 32%, which is half of the rate in Pakistan, despite sharing the same religion, fairly similar cultures, and being grouped into the same Indian civilization for the last several millennia, depending on where you draw that line. You also see lower numbers among Muslims born in Western countries. For instance, Pakistanis born in the UK see rates drop by over half by growing up in a different culture from their parents' home countries. But it'd be pretentious of us Westerners to just think these societies are backwarded for this. Because what is the real reason we don't do cousin marriage here in the West? Well, before we can get into any culture stuff, we have to look into the obvious question that everyone thinks about immediately when cousin marriage comes up. What about the kids? And the answer is yes, there are real health concerns. And quickly, a tradition on this channel is that if you catch any mistake I'm making in this video, leave a comment and I'll correct myself in the pinned comment below. Anyways, the basic issue is recessive genes. Everyone carries some harmful mutations, but usually they stay hidden because you need 2 copies for the disorder to appear. And when cousins have children, the chance that both parents carry the same recessive gene goes up because they share recent ancestors that likely had similar harmful mutations. This is why the risk of birth defects roughly double in first cousin marriage. Roughly speaking, the general population risk is around 2 to 3%. And for first cousin marriages, the rate increases to 4 to 6%. That means that the vast majority of children are still born healthy, but the elevated risk is real. And in a minority of cases where things go wrong, the damage can be severe. And this gets more and more serious the more cousin marriage is compounded, and not just a one-off choice, but a repeated pattern across generations. If your grandparents were cousins, and then your parents were cousins, and then you marry your cousin, the gene pool just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter. That is when rare disorders become much more common, and you start seeing sharp increases in inherited diseases, infant mortality, congenital defects, and developmental problems. That's why the first several generations of inbreeding for, say, the Habsburgs didn't result in many issues, but compounded over centuries led to the famous chin, short lifespans, and infertility seen famous among the Habsburg heirs. So no, this is not just one of those topics where people are just being dramatic. There is a legitimate biological downside. However, there is also this little known thing called aging, and it has impacts on mutations as well. As cells and tissues get older, they experience more DNA damage, more rounds of replication, weaker repair systems, and more opportunities for damaged cells to expand into larger clones. Now, this doesn't mean every older person is rapidly mutating into disease, but it does mean age steadily rises the background opportunity for mutations to appear and to persist. First, let's talk about aging fathers. As fathers get older, children tend to have more mutations present that were not present in the previous generation's inherited genes. That is largely because sperm-producing cells keep dividing throughout life, giving more chances for copying errors and selection among mutant sperm lineages. And now, I use a lot of big words, but on average, this doesn't lead to a whole lot of risk. Researchers found that for every 10 years of age you add to the father, the risk for certain conditions like autism, schizophrenia, etc. increased by 21%. Although it is an exponential increase, with fathers over 50 having a 2.5 times higher chance for autism in descendants versus 30-year-old fathers. Something to note though is that truly meaningful effects don't start to pop up until the mid to late 30s. But mothers also play a role in these mutations, and they have potential for much more severe consequences than fathers. Coming from the fact that they are born with every egg they will ever have, the eggs don't go under a process of splitting like sperm, but instead decay. That means a 20-year-old woman's eggs have been on pause for 20 years, allowing for DNA damage to accumulate, cellular machinery degrading, chromosome structures weakening. And this can quickly lead to dangerous results when looking at Down syndrome. Because if a woman is 25, there's a 1 in 1,200 chance that her child will be born with Down syndrome, meaning the child is more likely to be born with an extra finger or toe than Down syndrome. But at age 35, the chance increases to 1 in 350. Age 40, 1 in 100. And age 45, 1 in 30. That's a 40 times increase from the mid-20s to the mid-40s. And this isn't just the case for Down syndrome, but all kinds of conditions that have to deal with abnormal chromosomes. And in reality, most chromosomal abnormalities are not able to be born, leading to terrifying miscarriage rates as women get older. If a woman's under 30, there's around a 10% miscarriage rate. If they're around 40, 30 to 40% miscarriage rate. And at 45, we see numbers above 50%. Absolutely terrible. And compared to the data we have with reproducing with a first cousin, that increases your chances of miscarrying by about 2%. So that means waiting for 5 years is nearly 5 times as impactful on miscarriage rates as reproducing with your cousin. I'm saying all this because we don't think it's weird for a 30 or a 35-year-old to have kids. In fact, most women have their first kid around 28, with most women having their second kid around 32. Well, let's go back to that birth defect rate. Remember that reproducing with your first cousin increases the rate from 2 to 3% to 4 to 6%. Now, let's compare that to age. A kid with a 25-year-old mother is at the baseline, 2 to 3% chance for a birth defect. At age 30, 3%. Age 35, 4%. Age 38, 5%. Age 40, 7%. And at age 42, we see rates go up to 10%, meaning the match in risk happens around the 38 to 40-year-old mark. Also interesting to note that some research from Iceland has found that there are small increases in reproductive success when reproducing with third cousins, because it's the genetic sweet spot for pushing on our genes without life-altering deformities. Now, third cousins aren't included in cousin marriage, but I thought it was just an interesting thing to throw in here. So while there are real health concerns that first cousins should not get married and have kids together, that still doesn't explain our natural ick for those marrying between cousins and our inconsistent shaming of people 40 and older from having kids. So what about society and culture? We looked at nature, so now we have to look at nurture. And if you want to understand why cousin marriage stayed strong in Arab societies, the first thing to understand is this. It's not mainly about romance. It's not even mainly about religion. It's about kinship. In many Arab societies, especially the more traditional and rural ones, the extended family is the basic unit of life. Your relatives are your business network, your protection, your marriage market, your social insurance, and your political alliance. So marriage is not just two individuals pairing off. It is a strategy for keeping the family strong. If your daughter or son marries outside the family, resources and loyalty start flowing outward. If they marry their cousin, wealth, trust, land, obligations, and social capital stay concentrated inside the clan. And that matters in the agrarian clan-based societies. And it's something difficult for our Western world to understand, because we do not have a clan system of family living, but the vast majority of the world from Russia to China to Africa do. And as you can see on the graph here, any area that is part of the communitarian or anomic or African family system largely lives in a clan-based system. Now, most of us Westerners don't exactly know what a clan is, and it's basically just a group of people united by actual or often perceived kinship and descent. Even if lineage details are unknown and most likely wrong, a clan will claim descent from a founding member as a symbol of the clan's unity. I don't want to go into a whole conversation here about the difference in family systems. You can read more into that, checking my sources in the description below. But the one difference you should know is between exogamous and endogamous clans. Exogamous clan systems are what's found in much of Asia. It's a system where individuals have to marry outside of the clan. That means absolutely no cousins, as far as the clan's genealogy can go. In traditional China, this system meant that you needed to first find someone of an opposing clan. Then after marriage, the woman joined the man at his father's house to live together. That meant that the woman's new tie to her family was close to that of a visitor, and she, along with her new husband, were mostly subordinate to his father. If the father had 4 sons, that meant 4 different families living together in the same house, with the sons forever being underneath the father. Imagine what type of tension could be building up there. Endogamous clan meaning is the exact opposite. You can only marry within your clan. That doesn't mean they need to be closely related to you. They could be 5th or 6th cousins. But it does mean the options you have are limited and are often made for you through arranged marriages. Now, this seems absolutely bizarre for the life we live here in the West, but there are many benefits to this system over the Western system of the nuclear family. One of the arguments for a clan system is that if land gets divided among sons every generation, families can watch their property fragment into smaller and smaller pieces, where each individual piece isn't profitable enough to keep, and thus the family's land shrinks more and more over time, getting consolidated into other rich families' holdings. But if cousins marry, those pieces can be pulled back together in the next generation. It's basically a built-in anti-fragmentation mechanism. And another big one is trust. A stranger can lie to you. A stranger can mistreat your daughter. A stranger's family may have values you do not know or agree with. Now, a cousin can lie to you and mistreat your daughter and have different values from you, but they are inherently less likely to. With cousin marriage, the families know the history, the reputation, the expectations, and the level of religiosity and finances. It reduces uncertainty, and in societies, reducing uncertainty can be a big deal. However, one thing that people in these societies may not understand about us is that we don't have the same system as shame and honor. In Pakistan, if a woman brings dishonor to the family by fornicating, not veiling, or whatever the culture deems shameful for her to do, her husband or brother may kill her in order to restore honor to the clan. Now, this is not widely done in Pakistan, and there are other less violent ways of shaming members of the clan. But it does go to show the type of things that can happen in this system. And one thing that can't go understated is the gender segregation, most commonly found in the poorer rural areas, where a woman's life is fully about their family, and they cannot leave unaccompanied by a man of the clan. They can't attend mixed gender schools or work outside of the home. Their entire social network consists of relatives. So for some young people, cousins are literally the only opposite sex people they've ever had a conversation with. And you can't marry someone you've never met. And usually parents control marriage decisions with near total authority. The vast majority of weddings are arranged by the family. Even love marriages are usually just family-approved choices between cousins who've developed affection over the years. A 2019 survey found that 92% of Pakistani women reported having no say in choosing their spouse. So when you put it all together, arranged cousin marriage makes a lot more sense than the Westerners often assume. It keeps land together, it keeps wealth together, it keeps trust inside the family, it fits a society where clans matter more than individuals, and it fits a world where marriage is an alliance and a contract before it is a love story. But what's up with India? India is where this topic gets more complicated, because India is not one social system. It's more like a civilization-sized collection of different marriage systems. It'd be like looking at marriage customs across all of Europe and North America and trying to generalize them. That's why it's misleading to talk about Indian cousin marriage as if it's one thing. In much of North India, cousin marriage has historically been discouraged or restricted, especially among many Hindu populations with strong rules against marrying inside certain kin groups. Their detestability towards cousin marriage goes so far in some places that they separate men and women once they turn 12, forcing the boys and men to sleep and live in an area outside of the house, so bad thoughts don't happen. But in parts of South India, cousin marriage has long been common, especially uncle-niece marriage and cross-cousin marriage in some communities. So India has both worlds inside one country. For these Indian communities, cousin marriage works for reasons very similar to the Arab world, keeping property close, maintaining trust, and reinforcing family alliances. And given the extremely high population in India, even 10% of 1.5 billion will give you 150 million people married to their cousins. But now we have to talk about the question that everyone's been thinking. Is cousin marriage in the Arab world just because of Islam, given the map of cousin marriage in Islam matches pretty well? And the answer is clear, no. Islam did not start it. That distinction is important. Islam clearly allows for cousin marriage. The Quran doesn't ban it, and Muhammad himself married a cousin. That means in Islamic law it remained permissible, and because it was religiously protected, later reformers, even if they wanted to put restrictions on it or ban the practice for health concerns, couldn't do it. But cousin marriage had existed in the area for thousands of years. Jews had done it throughout most of their history, easily seen in prophets like Jacob and Abraham. It was commonplace in Egypt and Babylon, and it was common among pre-Islamic Arabian tribes. But we can easily compare it with a religion and society that took the opposite path. Christian Europe. The war against cousin marriage started in 500 AD with the Catholic Church, who began discouraging marriage with first cousins. Then, gradually over time, the restrictions began to grow and grow until 900 AD when everyone within 7 degrees of kinship was banned. That meant a large group of your village was too related for you in just a couple generations. That didn't just change family life, it changed the structure of society by forcing people to build alliances outside their clan. So why did the church start to do it? St. Augustine argued in the 5th century that marrying outside kin groups should bind social life more effectively. He noted that cousin marriage wasn't forbidden by divine law, but that people, quote, shrink from it because it felt too close to incest, and they should listen to that feeling for the good of society. That natural human revulsion to incest, visible across every culture, extended in Christian thinking to cousins. However, many historians like Jack Goody argue a much more cynical theory, that the church really was motivated by money. By breaking down the clan structure across Europe, many more people were not going to have any descendants to leave their land to on their death, allowing the church to inherit more and more land of Europe. And I'm not saying it was the case, but if it was, it worked amazingly because by 1200, the church owned around 1/4 of all the farmable land in Europe. No matter what the case, the church eventually rolled the prohibition back from the 7th to 4th degrees of kinship and settled on first cousins by the 1200s. And this story is a huge difference. Islam mostly preserved kin-based marriage options, and Christianity and Christian Europe, for whatever reason, spent centuries undermining them. China is the only real other example of a society putting a ban on first cousin marriage, which the Communist Party formed in the 1980s, citing health concerns. But other than them, the rest of the world over the last 150 years has followed this Western pattern. Not with laws, but with culture through modernization, and most importantly, urbanization. It's much harder to have an endogamous marriage in a tiny area with millions like those in cities. So the clan in virtually all urban areas like Europe has been quickly disappearing. And it's only a matter of time that as the Arab world continues to industrialize more and more, whether they're gonna follow the same path. Slavery is something from the past that Muslim and Christian societies actually shared quite a bit with, namely the mass industrialization of the process, with each accounting for millions of people entering into slavery. But how did these religious justifications in the Christian world, built over thousands of years, fall apart in the matter of a couple centuries? How did Christians reading the same book come to radically different conclusions? You can see all about that answer right here. And don't forget to not have kids in your 50s, be curious to different cultures, and think controversy. I'll catch you over in this video right here.